In this video, I'm going to show you how I service the trailer wheel bearings, and this is why. So a few years ago, we had a brand new camper trailer. It was probably about 2 months old, and we were driving home about 5 hours into the drive. All of a sudden, there was an explosion at the back. We could see smoke in the rear view mirror, and all of a sudden, the left wheel of a single axle camper trailer was just flying past us. The back of the trailer was dragging on the road, and thankfully, we're able to stop. So we were just grateful, no one got hurt. The manufacturer looked after us, gave us a full refund. So if that's taught me anything, is the importance of not taking the trailer maintenance for granted. So let's get started. You're going to need a wheel jack to lift up the trailer, vinyl gloves, paper towels, and some rags. But mainly in terms of tools, a rubber mallet or a hammer, a bearing kit. We'll talk more about that in a minute. A punch tool, some screwdrivers, some pliers, socket set, adjustable wrench, rattle gun if you have access to one, a wire brush or a wire wheel, some good quality degreaser. This one's just some grease off. Also a grease gun. Grease I'm using is this Penrite marine grease. This one's a lithium based grease. So I don't have any fancy workshop tools, so I've just jacked up the trailer with this wheel jack. You can see I've just propped it with a bit of wood. Also I've chocked the wheels on the other side, both front and back. That way it doesn't roll away. What I'm going to do now is we're going to remove the wheel and also the brake calipers. I've got the wheel off, so I'm going to take the brake caliper off. Okay, so there are basically 2 bolts that hold the brake calipers together. So there's one there and one there. So this is where the torque wrench is really handy. So you can see the 2 nuts there, that was pretty well fused just about. I'm going to have to give that a clean with a wire brush. So that's the 2 bolts taken out and should allow us to take out this brake caliper. So that's the caliper out, and I got this refurbished 2-3 years ago, and even then you can see just the salt water just basically just eats at it. But now that's off. I'll give that a spray and clean it up a little bit later before we put it back on. But we'll just sit that here. Also here, brake pads, stainless steel backing. 2-3 years on, still working pretty good. And the caliper now removed. Now it's going to take off this bearing body and then start to disassemble the hub. So here what I've done here, the bearing body has a rubber cover, and what I've done is just taped it up with electrical tape. Alright, so take the dust cover off. It's just basically a rubber boot. Sits on top. So to remove the bearing body, it's a matter of just hitting it with a mallet to loosen it up. You can see here the grease is a little bit discolored, so it means a few things. It could just been salt water getting in there and just contaminating it, or if the bearings have reached a really high temperature, kind of just burns them off and they get that color. But yeah, keen to see what the wheel bearings look like inside. So behind here is a castle nut locked in by a split pin. So I'll just clear this grease away. I'll pull this split pin down, pull that out, and just put that aside. So with the spanner, unlock that anti-clockwise, and that should just come off. In here is also a washer. Pulling onto that hub, this should release the outer bearing. You can see, look at that. That's the dirtiest out of the lot easily. The other one still had that red color or blue color, but here it's lost all its color. Now if you pull the rest out, once you've taken off the hub, there's a back rubber seal that sits on the back of that plate. So that comes out. That needs to be cleaned out as well. The back of this hub is the inner bearing, which is a bigger one, but it's locked in with this little plate. So I'm going to have to bang that out. And to do that, just grab a piece of wood and a hammer or a mallet, hit that and it should pop it out. Did I mention this is a really messy job? This is a messy job. That's the inner bearing. That seal sits on top of it. Just clear off the excess grease, put it in our little container. So for you guys following along at home, there's actually two options here. You can take out the bearings, clean them out, give them a good wash, and provided the bearings are in good nick, you can just repack them and reuse the same bearings into the wheel. And in cases where the grease looks sus, the bearings look discolored from high temperatures, you're better off just removing the whole lot and replacing it. So that's what I've done to the front two. I've actually just cleaned the bearings out, repacked them, put them back in, and I'll show you how to clean them and pack them. But in this case as well, I'm going to show you how to remove the old bearings and replace them with the new ones. So now I'm just going to clean out the spindle, get rid of all this excess grease. Don't forget to get this hole where the split pin sits through. That always collects old grease. And likewise for the inside of the hub, you want to make sure you want to clean out all the remnants of grease in there. Also, if you've got rust along the studs, get rid of them too. So give them a good brush, a good clean, get rid of all that salt flakes. But you can see here inside the hub, you've got the races. So that kind of cylinder shape circle there, that's where the bearings sit in and spin around. The bigger one as the inner, and the outer one is a smaller race in there. So I'll pop them out. So if you decide you want to keep the existing bearings and just clean them out and repack them, the race can stay inside the hub. But in this case, I'm opting to replace them just so I can show you how that's done. And if you do replace them, the bearing kit will have a set of race to replace the existing one. So it's recommended that you do that as well. So to remove the old race, it's a matter of just setting it down like that. You get your punch tool and a hammer, and then from here find an edge on the inner bearing, just whack it out. You can see here it's starting to pop out. Now what I do with the inner race is use that to pop out the outer race, because you can see here, if I just punched on it from here, this is a flat edge and hits the ground. So what I do is use this inner race, sit your hub on top, and basically you can punch it out. Oh, there you go. So that's the two races there. So now for the purpose of this, if you were replacing the bearings, you can literally just throw all these away. But because I want to be able to show you an option to keep the same bearings, I'm going to show you how to clean them. So you get your grease off. Just give it a bath like that. Get your cloth, and once you've thoroughly cleaned out the bearings, and I've had to wash it a couple of times to make sure there's no remnants of grease at all. You can see here the bearings themselves, I'm not sure if you can see in the camera, but it's got a bit of brown tinge to the actual bearing. So I'm glad we're actually getting rid of it, because over time that friction's probably developed heat, even though it was full of grease. But yeah, so at this point, like I said, if you weren't replacing the bearings, you leave the race in there, and then basically you just clean out the two bearings, the rubber seal, this metal plate. Because we're replacing the bearing kit, I've got this kit here. This is probably one of the most expensive ones, and because I was in a rush yesterday, I had no choice but to buy them. But you can easily get them cheaper online, and there's other brands as well. You'll see these Alco brands are made in Japan, whereas these other ones here, this one I could see printed on it was made in Brazil. Just getting Jaden to clean out the studs on this hub, getting rid of any rust or salt buildup. So I also need to do these two bolts for the brake calipers too. So to decide what kind of bearings you're going to need, here in Australia, You always hear it's either Ford or Holden. And a quick way to find that out is the back of your spindle, you've got your square axle here. If you measure them out, 45 mil is Ford bearings, and you can see here mine measures at 45 mil, and if they're 40 mil, they're Holden bearings. If in any doubt you're really not sure, if you want to be 100%, then it's a matter of just having a look at the serial number. But to give you a bit of an exploded view of how things come together, firstly the two races, so they'll sit in under here and inside here. I'll show you how to install them in a minute, but they'll go inside the actual hub itself. The two bearings, once they've been packed with grease, the big one goes on the inside and the small one goes on the outside, and they'll sit inside the race that's inside the hub. And so the inside of the hub, you get the metal plate that'll sit and it locks it all in place there. And then you've got your rubber seal. So to install the new race inside the cleaned hub, that goes onto there, and you can basically just hammer that straight down. I like to use a piece of wood actually. If you've got hardwoods, even better. I've got nothing but this soft stuff laying around. Okay, the wood just helps it from flying around. You get the old race sitting it on top the same way the new one sits in. Never do it this way, because otherwise they'll just be flush and you won't be able to hit it out. You sit them on top of each other the same way, facing out. Once again, you can use a piece of wood, smack it straight down. You can see here inside the hub there's a little lip there, so that's where we're trying to hit this race all the way down. So you keep banging that down, make sure it's all the way down, seated inside that stopper. Okay, so you can see here, because we've got this old race sitting on top of it, there's a bit of a lip there. And so flip that over using our punch. We should be able to pick up the bottom edge of that old race and then just punch it out. So once again, I'm going to use the old inner race and then sit it on top. Yeah, beautiful. That's the outer race done. Same with the back, you can see there. You need to punch it into that lip. And then we're going to do the same thing with the inner race. It's a piece of wood. Smack it straight down. And then you're going to use the old one. Once again, same orientation, pointing outwards. Okay, so flip that around. And then just punch that out. Once again, just using that punch tool, just punch out that inner race. Right, so that's done. All right, so that's the hub ready to go. The two races are in. Jaden's done a good job cleaning the studs. Don't worry about getting muck around the disc. We'll clean that out later. Okay, so now it's time to pack the bearings, either with the old or the new one, depending on which way you've gone. It's a matter of getting a bit of grease on your palm. This is the messy part, so I'll try to keep it as clean as I can. Get that on one palm, and then I'll start with the inner bearing, which is the bigger diameter bearing. Over here you can see there's a big gap underneath, so if I hold it like this, then basically just scrape it and pick up the grease off your hand a little bit at a time. And you can see here it's starting to push through, and just slowly pick up grease off your hand like that. Just that one spot, keep building it up, and you can see eventually the grease works its way up and out. And you know at that point that it's squeezed all the air out and you've basically just got grease running through the bearing. Yeah, it's a bit like your hair product, isn't it? So you see here, starting to come out, and then once again, just keep rotating. Okay, so that's it. So that's pretty much all done. What we're gonna do is sit it inside the race that's meant to sit on. So get a bit of grease inside this race. In fact, we're gonna pack it up later anyway, so we'll put in this inner bearing that sits in there, and then get a blob of grease, and we're just gonna pack that up, right up. Next is this metal seal, this plate here that sits on top. Bang that down with a piece of wood. Make sure that's nice and flush, beautiful. And then the rubber seal goes into the back of that. So what we're gonna do is just put a bit of grease in there, and that sits on top. I'm gonna give this a bit of a wipe, keep that nice and tidy, because that rubber boot or that rubber seal is what backs into the back of the spindle there. All right, so we're turning this around, and then we're going to pack the outside bearing. So this is the smaller one. And basically the same process as before. Scrape away at that grease on your hand. Okay, see, so that's packed as well. So now, same thing as the back. What we're gonna do is gonna just line the inside of the outer race. What we're gonna do is just gonna pack the spindle with a whole bit of grease, and then the bearing goes on top, okay? This hub now sits in here, so you can see everything's all packed. Back of it, we've got all the seals in place. It's all packed with grease. We'll slide it on top. So that rubber seal should just back up onto that spindle where the stopper is. So with the hub assembly in place, we're going to put in the clean washer, the castle nut. Okay, so we want to tighten that up. To the point where, tighten that up all the way tight, and then knock it back to the point where the hub freely moves. And then you can feel it as you tighten it up again, it kind of just resists and almost locks up. So what you need to do is just bring that back a bit, turn the castle nut to the nearest gap anti-clockwise, and then you can feel here there's free play and it's not too tight. The split pin goes into that hole. You can see it's a short and long one. Goes, put it straight down, straight in, smack that down tiny bit. Now with that pliers, need to bend the long pin upwards. Okay, so that's it. So that's pretty much done. At this point, if you don't have a bearing buddy, just whack on your dust cap. In our case, we're installing the bearing buddy back in place. Now, firstly, you can see here it's got the old grease. What I'd like to do is properly clean that out. In fact, I disassemble it. That way it saves you having to buy a new one. Obviously, if it's in really bad condition, get rid of it. But so far with what I've seen, the bearing buddies here aren't actually that bad. So to disassemble it, you need your screwdriver, and you can see here there's a little circle pin, and it's got a groove just on the right there. So if you pull that out with a flat head, you should be able to pry that out. That comes out. Chuck it into our wash. Directly underneath that is the spring that it was pushing down. The spring pushes this little flat base. Basically, the side is another clip, just like the top one here, which held everything together. And now we're going to give that a clean, give that a good wash. Inside the bearing buddy, you can see there, there's grooves where the top clip goes in. There's a rubber seal, and then there's also another groove there where the bottom clip sits in. So I like to clean everything out. So I've got a little fishing hook here I use. Okay, try not to pierce it, don't want to damage it. But that's it there. Okay, so the bearing body's all cleaned out, all dried up, so there shouldn't be any degreaser in there or no residue in there. You can see inside that deep groove in the middle is where this O-ring goes into. So that just pops back in there like that. Okay, so to install the first clip, so this is the stopping clip. So this goes in here. What I do is you sit the the ends of the clip inside that groove in there, and then basically it's just a matter of just pushing down on the top, and this clicks in place. Yeah. This metal base sits in here, followed by the spring, and then we've got the other clip that goes in there, and this time we'll put it in butt first into that groove, the outer groove, and it's a matter of just using the screwdriver, push it in. So that's one. Done. Okay, so what we're going to do now to install the bearing buddy, we're going to really pack it up. See that grease nipple here? So this is usually what you use the grease gun to pump it up with. So instead of doing that, there'll be a lot of air trapped in here. So what we're going to do is going to fill it up with grease. And if we do this right, it might not even need the grease gun. So installing the bearing buddy, where is the mallet? Tap it into place with the rubber mallet. Give it a nice good wipe. Once the bearing buddy is installed, basically grab your grease gun, push the nozzle into the grease nipple, and then give it a couple of pumps, and you can see that base plate actually just start to push into the spring. So you don't want too much pressure, but just enough. I had a spare rubber boot in the shed because I noticed that's probably the reason why the grease was dark. Look at that, the rubber boot's all split. Using the spare boot, and then finish it off. Just get a good amount of tape around it. If I didn't do this, usually what I've found is the rubber boot comes off. So it's done. Brake and parts cleaner. Just give that a nice clean all the way around, everywhere we've touched. Returning this back into place. So the brake pad sits in here. And then with these nuts that Jaden's cleaned, done really well. So that is our trailer wheel bearings done. I hope you found this video useful. And if you did, why not hit that subscribe button, and we'll see you next time.